We shall commence this module by discussing about the key indicators of national income. Since last 50 years, there have been two key indicators of national income, namely gross domestic product, which is also known as GDP, and the net domestic product, which is also known as NDP. These measures as part of national income accounts are developed for all the countries across the world. Their aim is to provide the background information or database for macroeconomic analysis. At the same time, they have served for a long time as a measure of economic progress and standard of living of a country. Unfortunately, these traditional measures of economic activity are insufficient and inaccurate as they fail to capture the role of environment and impact of economic activity on environment. National income accounts conventionally allows depreciation allowance for man-made assets, but no depreciation allowance is recommended for environmental assets. As a result, reduction or depletion of environment is treated as increase in income, but on the contrary, this depletion has a negative effect on the economy in the future. Measurement of NNP, that is Net National Product, by taking into account the benefit of natural resources can be considered as green GDP. This requires a generalization of conventional national income accounts, that is NIA, for the economy. United Nations methodology of integrated environmental and economic accounting postulates generalization of NIA. These methods require aggregation of changes in the natural resource stocks at micro level or an aggregation of changes over firms and households at sectoral level, and later they arrive at macro or national level aggregates. UN methodology describes generalization of production and used accounts for different sectors in the economy without explaining the method of aggregation of changes in natural resource stocks. Depletion of resource stock in macro level can be measured concretely, but there are difficulties in measuring depletion of environmental resource stocks. This module captures the rationale for environmental accounting, green GDP, and its sustainability along with its limitation. After studying this module, you will be able to understand the rationale for accounting for environmentally corrected GDP, to understand the system of national accounts, to comprehend the notion of environmentally sustainable GDP, that is green GDP, and to identify the drawbacks of the current system of accounting, to know about the methods of measuring income more accurately, and lastly, to explore the possibilities of computing environmental accounts in India. Let us begin our discussion about the Standard National Accounts, which is also known as SNA. The conventional notion of measuring economic activity in the form of GDP and NDP have proved to be inadequate measure in terms of measuring the contribution of environment and impact of economic activity on environment. Conventionally, environment provides source of raw materials and energy and also plays a crucial role as an assimilator in the process of production and consumption. These conventional measures of economic activity fail to acknowledge the role of environment. Therefore, UN has developed a new system of national accounts to view the relationship between environment and economy in 1968. The national income accounts, that is NIA, are categorized in three ways. First, current accounts. Second, accumulation accounts. And third, the balance sheets. First, current accounts deal with the production income and use of income. Second, accumulation accounts captures changes in the assets and liabilities and the changes in the net worth. Third, balance sheet on the other hand presents the stock of assets and liabilities and net worth. The most commonly used account is the current account, also known as supply and use account. This supply and use account calculates or measures income in three ways. First, sum of value added across all industries, that is production account. Second, sum of final consumption and saving, that is disposable income, use of income account. And third, sum of employee consumption and operating surplus, that is distribution of income account. Production in the system of national accounts includes only those goods and services that are bought and sold in the market. In addition to supply and use accounts, there are also asset accounts. In 1993, SNA has started to include natural assets in asset accounts if ownership rights of natural assets prevail and they impact economic benefit to their owners. These natural assets include value of livestock for breeding, orchards, private plantations, timber tracts, etc. As a result, the products of these assets are usually valued in the market either directly or indirectly. Such assets are referred to as economic assets in SNA. Due to the presence of asset accounts in national accounts, another identity is created which indicates the difference between operating and closing stock of assets during the accounting period. This is carried for both produced and non-produced assets. None of the components related to non-produced economic assets appear in the calculation of net domestic product, that is NDP. This is because the changes in the non-produced natural assets between opening and closing stocks re-explained in SNA as holding gains or losses or as changes in the volume of assets. Moving on to discuss about the environmentally sustainable GDP, which is also known as green GDP. A sustainable income can be defined as maximum attainable in a particular period with an assurance or guarantee that the same level of income will be available in the future periods given the resource constraint in the form of labor, capital, man-made capital and natural capital. Therefore, measurement of environmentally sustainable income requires a system of natural accounts that integrates environmental and economic problems. According to the above definition of sustainable income, income is directly related to the availability of man-made and natural capital. Income, thus defined, indicates welfare of the nation in spite of the regressive discussion whether the net national product would adequately capture the welfare of the nation. There have been number of discussions in search of meaningful welfare concepts. For example, Samuelson in 1961 rejected the current income concept such as NNP and suggested the concept of wealth reflected in present discounted value of the future consumption. Similarly, Witzman in 1976 indicated that NNP is a proxy for the present discounted value of the future consumption. Studies by Solow in 1974, Hartwig in 1977-78 made an attempt to derive the condition in which real consumption might be maintained along with the depletion stock of exhaustible resources like fossil fuels, minerals and metals. Results of these studies are known as Hartwig rule, which implies that the consumption may be held constant if exhaustible resources derive rents from the intertemporal efficient rule. This rule is based on the assumption of sustainability between man-made capital and natural capital. In this context, Solow has shown that optimal intertemporal resource allocation of man-made capital requires the maintenance of the existing capital stock by making investment equal to depreciation. The criticism of Solow-Hartwig notion sustainable income is the basic fundamental that man-made capital cannot be substituted for the natural capital simply due to the fact that natural capital can be exploited by man but it can be created by man. Next, we shall understand the limitations in conventional system of accounting. There are large number of loopholes or drawbacks associated with the conventional method of measuring national income. Some of the crucial loopholes are listed below. The conventional measures of accounting national income concentrated mainly on the goods and services that are bought and sold in the market. They do not take into account the non-marketed services obtained by natural assets. This mainly indicates forest, which entail environmental services like soil erosion, flood control, protection from soil erosion along with marketed goods like fuel, wood and timber. The usual method of national accounts captures the economic contribution of forest but fails to consider environmental services. A very crucial component of the environment, like waste disposal services, are also ignored in the national accounts. Next, in these traditional methods of computing national accounts, man-made and natural assets are treated inconsistently. Various sustainable income measures like net national product or net domestic product account for depreciation of man-made machinery in order to allow fault replacement of losses in capital stock. Unfortunately, losses in natural stock are not accounted for depreciation when forests are converted to non-forest application, that is when forest land use changes. Then the national accounts includes only the expenditure incurred in cutting the forest, but it fails to account for losses to the society in the process of transfer. This decline in the total forest area is captured as a change in the volume, but there are no implication or impact on GDP. Next, various measures like GDP and NDP fail to indicate the deterioration of environment. In fact, the cost incurred in improvising the environment quality are recorded as increase in national income and national product. This would mainly include cleaning up of rivers, treatment of drinking water, and investment in preventive measures to protect from the negative effects of pollution. All these expenditures are indicated as a rise in GDP. Next, this conventional system of accounting indicates that the environmental assets like air, water, etc. are deteriorated on the account of economic activity, leading to a fall in the social welfare. On the contrary, the consequent adjustments required to capture above phenomenon are not mentioned in the accounts. This is further responsible for creating an impression of rise in national income, while on the contrary, national wealth is falling. Next, the failure to ignore the contribution of non-market value of environmental goods along with reduction in natural resources could consequently lead to incorrect representation of present well-being of the nation, as well as hampers economy's production and substitution possibilities. As a result, the current method of national income accounts are insufficient and inappropriate indicators of social welfare. At the same time, these measures impart misleading knowledge about sustainability of resources. Consequently, the concerned policymakers are misinformed about the crucial linkage between economic growth and the environment. Finally, one should resort to the environmental accounting in order to remove these biases. Let us now learn about the measuring income more accurately. In order to compute environmentally accurate income, two forms of adjustment are required in the existing national income and product account. First, defining and valuing the non-marketed environmental goods and services, and second, measuring and valuing changes in the stock of natural resources. In order to make an account of natural resources like forest, the concept of NDP must be expanded to include non-marketed benefits associated with the forest. This conventional NDP must also be adjusted to incorporate the value of change in the forest resources. There have been extensive discussions on consensus of green national accounts, but no concrete landmark has been laid down regarding how to accomplish it. Different researchers have postulated different approaches. Various approaches can be grouped under following heads. First, pollution expenditure accounting. Second, physical accounting. Third, development of green indicators. And fourth, extension of SNA type system. Let us study each of these 4 points in detail now. Pollution expenditure accounting. In such a type of accounting, series of data on pollution abatement and various environmental expenditures are maintained. Such data series are maintained by US since 1972 and also available for OECD countries, but this method has certain drawbacks, like they include expenditure already incurred on the account of policy, standard business or household practice. Therefore, they should be included as additions to the traditional income accounts. Next, the pollution abatement expenditure data overestimates the actual opportunity cost since they have already been accounted in value added component of the sector producing them, and this leads to double accounting. Next, use of this method has limited scope of policy. Now the second type of accounting is physical accounting. This method accounts for physical information of the natural environment and its status. Physical indicators of forest like open forest, volume of stock of timber, area under dense forest, quality of air in terms of CO2 emission, SPM, nitrogen oxide emissions as well as water using physical indicators like BOD, COD and pH. There are certain difficulties associated in this method like incomparability of units, severity of environmental problems not reflected. Next is development of green indicators. Third approach is to construct green GDP or economic index to substitute the traditional GDP or NDP. There are two approaches involved in this. The first approach constructs new indicators of well-being. This is obtained by changing the traditional aggregates like nullifying the pollution expenditure from GDP and including the negative effect of urbanization. This approach has been used by Nortos and Tobin, who considered it as a measure of economic welfare, that is MEW, which is also called as Index of Sustainable Economic Welfare, that is ISEW. The second approach involves altering the measures of net product. The next system is extension of SNA type system. This approach incorporates the existing SNA and covers all the sectors that are interlinked with environment. Such an approach is used by United Nations Satellite System of Integrated Environmental and Economic Accounting and Environmental and Natural Resource Accounting Framework. SEEA attempts to remove the limitations of SNA by reclassifying component of volume changes in calculation of NDP. Now, we shall understand about the environmental accounts in India. Developing an environmental account system in India is definitely not an easy task as it involves a huge data requirement. This would further involve various data limitations while accurately accounting for environment. Environmental accounting in India at the same time requires localized approach because the city pollution will not entail that nearby places are also polluted. Moreover, within the city, quality of air will also vary depending upon its location. Similarly, same thing prevails for the water because extent of pollution is dependent on whether the location is upstream or downstream, given the fact water is a mobile source. This further indicates several monitoring points of water quality which would lead to developing accounts at many locations. Various prescribed valuation methods which attempt to develop such accounts are controversial. Therefore, research on this particular aspect has several limitations. However, one should not discourage the process of building up such accounts in developing nations. Let us now summarize what we have learned in this module. The two indicators of national income, that is GDP and NDP, have been used as key indicators since last 50 years as a part of national income accounts in all the countries across the world. In national income accounting, no account is made for depreciation of allowance for environmental assets while there exists depreciation allowance for man-made assets. Measuring NNP by taking into account benefits of natural resources are considered as green GDP. UN has developed a new system of national accounts to view the relationship between environment and economics in 1968. Environmentally sustainable GDP or green GDP is the maximum attainable income that guarantees the same level of income in future periods given the resource constraints. The current system of national accounts are inadequate indicator of social welfare. By defining and valuing the non-marketed environmental goods and services and by measuring and valuing the changes in the stock of natural resources, one can attempt to measure income more accurately. Constructing environmental accounts in India is not an easy task as it deals with huge data and requires a localized approach which would further result in several monitoring points. But this does not conclude that we should not make an attempt to compute environmental accounts for developing nations like India.